All right, what's up, man?
What's up?
Nothing much. I would like to preface this by saying that I'm not a Jew hater. So,
Okay. So what's your problem with Israel?
my biggest problem with Israel is that I believe that they are committing massive atrocities against the Palestinian people. Like, my first example would be on purposely targeting civilians.
Okay. Can you prove that they're purposely targeting civilians?
Yeah, okay. Let me give you a source. One, this was from Amnesty International, and they documented from October of 2023 all the way to April of 2024. Israel did 15 airstrikes across Gaza that unalived 334 civilians, and Amnesty International was able to find absolutely zero evidence that Israel was actually going after any military targets. Then they basically asked Israel and Israeli officials, like, could you provide any evidence? And they couldn't provide any evidence. And even if there was evidence, I would say that they did not do everything they can to minimize civilian deaths in these instances, because only one out of these 15 airstrikes that they did actually had an evacuation order.
Okay, so the fact that there's an evacuation order in the first place shows intent not to kill civilians, but you can't just say, oh, well, it looks like they're doing a lot of strikes and some civilians have died, therefore it must be intentional. You have to demonstrate intent. You have to show to me, since you've made the claim that they're intentionally killing civilians, not that they're negligently killing civilians, but that they are intentionally seeking out civilians and murdering them. It is on you, the burden of proof is on you to prove and demonstrate that intent, and you haven't done that. You've just said, well, they've done a lot of strikes and some civilians have died, therefore it must be on purpose. Doesn't make sense.
No, but that's not what I said.
It is what you said.
The reason why I'm saying this is intentionally trying to just unalive civilians is because they couldn't provide any evidence that they were going after military targets. So Amnesty International said, fine, you can't provide the evidence, we'll look for the evidence, and there is no evidence. If you want to look for intent, you can look what the president of Israel said. I'm not going to say his name because I'm literally going to butcher it, but I think it's like Isaac, starts with the H, his last name starts with the H, and he literally basically said the idea of innocence in Gaza doesn't really exist. It's an entire nation. So there's the intent to unalive civilians. They don't believe there's any civilians in Gaza.
Yeah, okay, so first of all, no, that's not how that works. So let's just rewind a little bit. So you said that because Israel didn't provide any evidence that it wasn't intentional or that there were legitimate military targets, that means it must have been the intentional killing of civilians. That's conjecture. It's an absence of evidence. You're saying that because there is no evidence, that's evidence, which isn't an argument. You can't say that a lack of evidence is evidence, okay? This would never hold up in like any kind of court or anything like this, okay? Instead, what you would need is actual demonstrable evidence that Israel is intentionally targeting civilians. There are tons of rational reasons why Israel might decline to provide their intelligence on military targets in the Gaza Strip. Why might we not tell people what exactly we're striking during a war? Because we don't want our enemy to know that we know where they are. Obviously, right? So we're not going to tell the press or Amnesty International, the joke of a humanitarian organization, hey, yeah, so we're actually striking the interim leader of Hamas right here in this exact location. Here are the coordinates. Doesn't make any sense. So there's one rational reason why Israel might decline to tell people exactly what they're striking, when they're striking, and how they're striking. Again, you admitted yourself that they gave evacuation orders for at least one of these strikes, which shows intent not to kill civilians. Israel routinely shows intent to not only not kill civilians, but to prevent civilian deaths to a degree that no other country does. They drop leaflets, they give evacuation orders, they set up evacuation zones, they make mass phone calls to civilian areas before they strike them, they roof knock, they send out mass text messages to civilians before they strike areas where civilians might be. No other country does this to the degree that Israel does this. Okay, but Israel does it because they want to minimize civilian deaths as much as possible. If we were looking at World War II and we were trying to demonstrate intent for the British intentionally killing Nazi civilians, we wouldn't say, well, just look at it. 400,000 civilians died in Berlin. That must mean they were doing it intentionally. No, there's probably reasons why this was the case. Probably because, A, they didn't have guided munitions at this time, so they were just dropping bombs out of the belly of an airplane as close to a target as they could get, which resulted in higher civilian casualties. So, that's not going to be fundamental proof that Israel is intentionally killing civilians.
Okay, I guess I'll just start with kind of the four biggest points that I've seen. One, this notion that the Israeli government shouldn't have to provide evidence to anybody. I believe that if you really want to say that you're a small government person because you're right wing, then you should not be for governments just being able to unalive literally whoever they want without providing any evidence that there's any military targets. And Amnesty International said, fine, Israel, you won't provide the evidence, then we'll do the investigation.
And they
did the investigation and they found zero evidence. I already said what the intent was. I already explained how the president of Israel and lots of high-member Israeli officials don't believe there's any innocents in Gaza. And it's funny how you talk about the evacuation orders, and you talk about how one of the evacuation orders method was roof knocking, but roof knocking as the norm actually ended on October 7th of 2023. So Israel doesn't normally use that. And many international organizations have explained why these evacuation orders are super inefficient. Lots of times they don't provide maps. Lots of times they're not time specific. Lots of times they're contradictory. So they'll tell civilians to flee to an area, but this area have already been put under evacuation order. And two, even when Israel says, fine, you can evacuate, we're going to give you these evacuation what's called evacuation routes that they designated as safe for civilians. They bombed those evacuation routes. And then when those Palestinians got to these two humanitarian zones that they specifically laid out in like 2023 and 2024, they bombed the humanitarian zones. So I would ask the question, why do you think governments should be able to unalive people without providing any evidence? And two, if Israel's not trying to target civilians, why do they show a consistent pattern of bombing people without any evidence of military targets and bombing areas that they told civilians that were safe?
Yeah, so you're talking about, first of all, let's just get this Isaac Herzog quote out of the way. So the president of Israel did not say that every civilian in Gaza is guilty. Instead, what he said is an entire nation out there is responsible for the October 7th terrorist attack, and that widespread civilian support in Gaza for the crimes and atrocities of October 7th should not be ignored. He didn't say there are no innocent civilians in Gaza. What he said is that an entire nation is responsible and that the crimes of civilians or the furtherance of these attacks by civilians should not be ignored. So an entire country, Gaza, which is essentially like a proto-country, right, voted in 2006 for Hamas to be the sole governing authority of the Gaza Strip. Everybody else voted for Fatah, which is also a terrorist organization. It's a remnant of the PLO. Okay? They continue, per 2023, to poll with majority support for Hamas, the genocidal terrorist organization whose charter says the day of judgment will not come about until the Muslims fight the Jews, killing the Jews. When the Jews hide behind stones and trees, the stones and trees will say, "O Muslims, O Abdullah, there's a Jew behind me, come and kill him." That is a hadith. Okay, they believe that it is essential to their religion to kill every Jew on the planet. Their leader, Fatih Hamad, went on the world stage and said, all of you Palestinians in diaspora, wherever you find a Jew on this planet, take care of him by way of slaughter and killing. Wherever you find a Jew, not an Israeli, wherever you find a Jew on this planet, not just in Israel, anywhere on the globe, take care of him by way of slaughter and killing. Slaughter a Jew wherever you find him. Okay? Furthermore, you talked about Israel bombing humanitarian zones, and it seems evident that you're talking about the Rafah zone, yeah?
I forgot the specific names, but sure, we can actually talk about
okay.
Rafah.
Do you know which part of Rafah the humanitarian zone is in?
No, not specifically off the top of my head.
Okay, so the humanitarian zone is in eastern Rafah. Okay, Hamas operates in western Rafah. Israel did not bomb the humanitarian zone in eastern Rafah. They bombed Hamas operatives in western Rafah. But people teach you Rafah, all of Rafah, is a humanitarian zone and cannot be touched, which is not the case because Hamas operates there. So there was these reports of a tent fire in the Rafah humanitarian zone, I think last year, right? And that's probably what you're referring to. In reality, what happened is Israel struck a Hamas compound, the distance of several football fields away from the humanitarian zone, with the smallest munition in their arsenal. It was a 250-pound bomb. Okay, and then Hamas argued that the tent fire within the camp was started because a piece of metal, a shrapnel from this bomb, remained on fire while it flew through the air through the distance of several football fields and then landed on a tent in Rafah and caught the whole place on fire. In reality, it was later discovered that the tent fires were started by Hamas operatives shooting RPGs next to tents within the humanitarian zone, trying to shoot down Israeli planes. So no, Israel did not strike humanitarian zones. Israel set those humanitarian zones up themselves. Okay, they're not going to attack when they know that they're fighting a PR war, a humanitarian zone, even if they wanted to, especially one that they set up themselves. I think that you're being fed lies in buying into Hamas propaganda.
I guess I'll just kind of address the first couple claims. I'm really trying to pull up this specific quote from the president of Israel. And the problem is that he didn't just say that it was just the entire nation. He was specifically talking about the idea of basically there being people who aren't involved about what happened on October 7th is not true. This idea of civilians.
His exact quote
really
is there's an entire nation out there responsible.
And I get the pro-Israeli responses to be like, well, it is an entire nation because there's a bunch of Palestinians who support Hamas. But one of my first claims against that would be, one, if you brutally occupy people for decades, they're going to violently resist. If you crush peaceful resistance when they try to peacefully resist, they're going to violently resist and they're going to do terrorism. And two, with your points of them not targeting humanitarian zones, I want everybody in this panel to look up right now. You can look this up on Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch or the UN. You can look this up on Euromed Moderator or Al Jazeera. Israel, the 2 humanitarian zones that they set out in Gaza that they designate to be safe, they have bombed those humanitarian zones multiple times. And they haven't just bombed the humanitarian zones.
Wait, are you talking about...
They've literally bombed even the evacuation routes multiple times. And these evacuation orders that they give aren't even actually good because there's a whole lot of contradictory information in there, and lots of times they're not time specific, and lots of times they don't give maps. Like I've already said, I don't understand this idea of just saying that, well, Israel does have intents, but Israeli politicians constantly say things like Palestinians aren't innocent. It's an entire nation. They constantly say things like we're fighting human animals. We need to cut off all the food, water, electricity, and medicine. And then what did they do? For 80 days, they cut off all the food, water, electricity, and medicine. This wasn't their first time doing that, by the way, just this year. They did it back in 2023 after October 7th. They cut off the food, water, and medicine. And even to this day, when they have let in some, they deny lots of food trucks arbitrarily, and they have denied hundreds of medical supplies going into Gaza. There's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza as we speak right now.
Okay, so you said that they brutally occupied people for decades and that this gives them justification to resist. Do you know the order? When you say occupation, I assume that you're talking about like the blockade and stuff like that?
I'm talking about specifically controlling like the air, land, seaboard.
Yeah, so the blockade. Yeah, okay, blockade.
But not specifically.
Are you aware of the order in which the events took place leading up to the blockade going in place?
Yeah.
Okay,
Blockade came in 2007. Hamas was elected in 2006.
Okay.
And
what happened before that? What happened before that?
Before 2006?
Yeah, before 2006.
This is where you're going to bring up the settlers and the soldiers withdrew.
No.
In 2005.
No. I mean, it's a plot point for
I'm
sure.
surprised. Okay.
Yeah, no. What happened prior to this was the Second Intifada, where over 1,000 Jews were brutally massacred by Hamas operating out of the Gaza Strip. They bombed schools, they bombed shopping malls, they bombed restaurants, they bombed everywhere you'd find a civilian and nowhere you'd find a military target. They ruthlessly slaughtered children face to face, not with bombs. They ruthlessly murdered people on buses. They ruthlessly murdered people at restaurants, people just out on the town for the day, slaughtered them. Okay, they shot them, they used suicide vests, they looked them in the eyes, and they killed them. Okay, that's why the blockade went up. In 2005, Israel unilaterally withdrew from the Gaza Strip. In 2006, Hamas was democratically elected by the Palestinian people in the Palestinian Legislative Council. Again, the terrorist organization whose charter literally says the Day of Judgment will not come about until the Muslims fight the Jews, killing the Jews. They believe it's integral and necessary for their religion to kill every Jew on the planet in order for the Judgment Day to come. Those people are democratically elected as the sole governing authority of the Gaza Strip. Shortly thereafter, they kill all of their rival political party in the Gaza Strip. They murder every member of Fatah who's left in the Gaza Strip. They throw them from buildings and they slaughter them wherever they can find them. And then they continue to carry out attacks from the Gaza Strip. In 2007, Israel put them under a blockade because they could not relentlessly help themselves from attacking innocent Israeli civilians. And unfortunately, a lot of them were people living on the border, people who they're basically hippies, right? I've been to these towns in southern Israel. There is a home in southern Israel where an elderly couple was just burned alive on October 7th, 2023, and their children, on the remnants of their house, have put up a banner calling for peace with the Gazans on the exact place where their parents were burned alive and killed by Gazans and their government. Okay, so that's why the blockade went up. It wasn't just this, oh, Israel hates Arabs. In fact, 21% of Israel's population are Arabs. Those are citizens, full rights-bearing citizens. They serve in the Knesset. They vote in elections. They can live wherever they want. They can buy land. They can purchase homes. They can do whatever they want, and they can go wherever they want. Israel is not discriminatory or racist towards Arabs. In fact, they have a security risk on their southern border in Gaza. So much so that when Egypt was negotiating to get the Sinai Peninsula back after the Six-Day War, when Israel won it in battle, Egypt said, we don't want the Gaza Strip. It was previously Egyptian territory. We don't want, keep the Gaza Strip. It's too much of a risk for us. You then said that Israel bombed humanitarian zones, and what I believe you're talking about is the bombing of former humanitarian zones. So what Israel does with a lot of humanitarian zones is they have to be moved around constantly because Hamas tends to come into the humanitarian zones and embed themselves among civilians. So what they'll do is they'll say, okay, you guys go here. This is a humanitarian zone. And then they'll give new orders, okay, go over here because this place is now infested by Hamas. And they'll bomb this place after everybody has evacuated to the new humanitarian zone. And they'll continue moving them around. It's kind of like, I don't know, but this is what they do, okay? So you also said that this quote that's always taken out of context by an Israeli official where they said that we're fighting human animals. Right, so are they fighting Gazans? Yeah, they're fighting Gazans, but they're not fighting Gazan civilians. So if you say that they say they're fighting human animals, I would agree with whoever said that, right? Because I view Hamas as subhuman. They are animals, and I don't view them as the same as me. I think that they're pieces of garbage that need to be discarded. I don't view Gazan civilians that way, innocent Gazan civilians, and Israel isn't fighting innocent Gazan civilians. So if they say they're fighting human animals, it's evident who they're talking about. They're fighting Hamas, not Gazan civilians. So I don't see that quote as problematic in any way, shape, or form. Furthermore, you said they cut off food, water, and medicine. It is a fact that Israel is the biggest provider of food, water, and medicine to the Gaza Strip of any country in the world. Are you familiar with UNRWA? You know what UNRWA is?
Yeah.
Okay, UNRWA is the
Which
UN.
they banned, by the way.
For those who aren't aware, UNRWA is the UN organization dedicated to the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. It's the only UN organization that is dedicated, or a humanitarian relief organization that is dedicated to a single place or people. So that's what UNRWA is. If you go to the UNRWA website, you can see the amount of food trucks that pass through every entrance into Gaza, and you can see that consistently throughout this war. Israel was providing 600 trucks of food per day, whereas the people of Egypt were only allowing roughly 70 to 200 per day through their crossing. But the Karim Shalom crossing was providing more than any other country, which gave them a diet of, according to Forbes, 3,000 calories per day per person, which is more than most humans could consume in a single day. Not to mention the fact that they have a very high population of children in the Gaza Strip. I think, like high 40%. Children aren't consuming 3,000 calories per day. It's a surplus of food. So I don't buy this argument that Israel just wants to starve the people of Gaza. Otherwise, they wouldn't be providing them 600 trucks of food per day per person. And furthermore, they're under no obligation to provide food to their enemies. I don't know where this notion came from that you're obligated when fighting another nation to provide food to the people of your adversary. Rather, it's the obligation of the government of that country if they want to keep fighting to provide food to their people, not the other way around. And if you want to talk about blockades and the prevention of food access, there is a certain people that is responsible for the starting of blockades in the Levant, specifically over the fight of Israel. So in 1947, Arab dissidents who started the civil war against Israel blockaded Jerusalem. They actually blockaded almost every street in Israel. And they starved people out, and they killed them. They surrounded them, and they slaughtered them. They left their bodies in fields to rot for years, despite the fact that it is sacred to both Muslims and Jews to bury your dead as quickly as possible so that they can go to heaven. They didn't care. They let their bodies rot in fields, and they started the blockades in 1947. Go ahead.
Okay, I guess there was a lot of points made, so I'll just kind of go over each and every single one. First, we talk about the Second Intifada, but this completely ignores the First Intifada, which was from 1987 to 1993, which most people in this chat should know. The first Intifada was overwhelmingly peaceful, mainly characterized by civil
Hundreds of Jews
demonstrations,
were killed.
peaceful protests,
Hundreds of Jews were
boycotts,
killed.
and strikes. Hold on, wait.
Hundreds of Jews were murdered.
Wait, sir, I'll let you talk because you just let me finish real quick. And Israel responded to this by doing an iron fist policy, where they broke Palestinian arms, they broke Palestinian legs, they cracked their skulls, and they acted disproportionately violent. And they incited lots of the violence in the first Intifada. This is what people don't understand. That last time the Israeli soldiers would fire rubber bullets into peaceful Palestinian protests, then there'll come violence, and then the Palestinians will start throwing rocks. The Israel said, oh, shoot, they're throwing rocks, well, now we get to shoot. So that's what happened in the first Intifada. They tried to do it peacefully, Israel crushed it, so then they did it violently. I don't support the terrorism. I don't support the violence, but I understand why they did it. And this idea that like Hamas is the reason for the occupation, when the occupation dates back to 1967, is just like such a silly notion that I don't understand how anybody could even like come to that conclusion. Even after Israel withdrew the soldiers, even after Israel withdrew the settlers, they still control the air borders, they still control the sea borders, they still control the land borders, they control the people and goods that could go in and out, and they of course implemented the blockade in 2007 as a response to Hamas. Hamas is bad, but you don't get to do collective punishment as a response to Hamas. You keep saying, well, why does Israel have to provide food to their enemies? And I hear lots of pro-Israeli people say that, but it's not about providing food to your enemies. It's about following international law. Under international law, if you're an occupying power, you have to provide for the well-being of the people in the occupied territories. So from March 2nd of 2025 to mid-May, when Israel didn't let a single food truck into Gaza, they completely violated that. And when, according to Amnesty International again and Human Rights Watch, when they arbitrarily deny food trucks and arbitrarily delay them, they are not providing for the well-being of the people in Gaza. Gaza is going through a humanitarian crisis. 96% of the population is suffering from acute food insecurity, which is when you're so hungry that your life is at risk. And a couple of other points you made, like for example, you said that they're not discriminatory towards Palestinians. What about the 2018 nation-state law, which literally says that self-determination is unique to Jewish people and demotes Arabic from an official language to a special status language and promotes Hebrew as the official language, and said the highly illegal settlements in the West Bank are a natural virtue? What about 2019, where Bibi literally said, we're not a nation of citizens, we are a nation of Jewish people? This is not only discriminatory to Arabs in Israel, this is literally discriminatory to anybody who's not a Jew in Israel. And I don't understand. It's so funny to me that the small government crowd, the right-wing small government crowd, would be so for a superpower government like Israel occupying a group of people and taking away their rights by expanding settlements, confiscating their land, demolishing their homes, putting settlers in that land, and settlers come into the land and they commit violence with impunity. And the government doesn't, and their government doesn't need to provide evidence that the people they're unaliving are actual military targets. They can just unalive literally anybody they want.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to respond to all this. So you said the first Intifada was largely peaceful, which isn't true. It left hundreds of Jews dead, almost 1,000 of them. They were murdered by Palestinian dissidents, terrorists, who attacked their country, invaded their country, and killed them. So no, the first Intifada was not peaceful. They didn't try to do it peacefully. I don't know why you brought that up as a point in your favor, because it doesn't work for you. It's just another example of Palestinian terrorism against not only Jews but also Arabs living in Israel. Yeah, I don't know where you were going with that. The reason that you said, I don't know why you didn't bring up the first Intifada. The reason I didn't bring up the first Intifada is because we're talking about Hamas. Okay, Hamas didn't carry out the first Intifada. They carried out the second Intifada. It was relevant. That's why I brought it up. The first Intifada was largely carried out by the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which is another terrorist organization which serves as the government of the West Bank. So, yeah, I don't know where you're going with that. So the occupation started in 1967. So tell me, in just quick answers here, who was in charge of the Gaza Strip prior to 1967?
Egypt.
Oh, would you consider that an occupation?
100%. And
okay.
I am very
and prior to that, who was in charge of the Gaza Strip?
After Egypt left
before
1967.
Before Egypt, who was in charge of the Gaza Strip?
It would be the Palestinian Mandate, and it would be the British Empire.
Okay, and prior to that, who was in charge of the Gaza Strip?
The Ottomans.
Okay, and prior to that, who was in charge of the Gaza Strip?
The Ottomans? What is this?
Yeah, my point here is, was there any point in history in which there was a Palestinian government in the Gaza Strip?
No, that doesn't.
Oh, okay. Crazy. So how can you occupy a people that never possessed the land in the first
Wait, that
place?
doesn't actually.
So, no, it's still my turn, so you can pause. Okay. You can't occupy a country against a country that never existed. You cannot do it. It's physically impossible. So you said that this violates international law, that Israel is, it's not about Israel being required to provide aid to people, their enemy, but it's actually about international law requiring Israel to, or any country to provide food aid to the people that they're occupying. First of all, international law is a fucking joke. Second of all, Israel's not occupying the Gaza Strip. There isn't Israel's not set up a government in the Gaza Strip. In fact, the Gazans have their own government, a government that's actively working against them. Why might Israel have stopped providing them food aid? Well, it's because the current government of the Gaza Strip, the people who are actually occupying the Gaza Strip, Hamas, they steal the food aid that Israel gives them. They raid the food trucks. They feed their soldiers, and then they take what's left and they sell it back to the Palestinian people. It's supposed to be free to them. Instead, Hamas sells it back to them at jacked up prices, and they use the money that they make from that food aid to buy weapons and hire more soldiers and continue perpetuating the war that you're complaining about against the Palestinian people. They continue to perpetuate that war, okay? They continue to fight it. All they'd have to do is surrender, okay? Just surrender. Nope, but instead, we're going to steal food aid, sell it back to the Palestinian people at jacked up prices, buy weapons, hire soldiers, and continue to perpetuate that war that you're complaining about against the Palestinian people. You said, let's see, we got that part, the occupation. You said the nation-state law. Okay, this is so cringe. I can't believe you people still bring the nation-state law up. Nation-state law is purely symbolic. The Supreme Court ruled on this. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't create any laws against people. Instead, what it says is that the Jewish people as a whole, as a country, have the right to self-determination. It does not say that the Arabs living in Israel don't have self-determination. It doesn't say that they're not allowed to buy property or vote in elections or anything. Instead, it says the Jewish people as an entity, okay, have the right to self-determination in the land of Israel. It is a purely symbolic rule, and it has nothing to do with individuals. So it doesn't say a Jewish person will have more of a right to self-determination than an Arab person living in Israel, okay, because they're both Israeli citizens, and the laws that guide what a person is or isn't allowed to do have nothing to do with nation-state law. So it doesn't actually enact any law against or for any person. Okay, so the nation-state law is a joke, and I don't know why you people keep and continue to bring it up. In fact, again, there are roughly a dozen Arab members of the Israeli Knesset. There is a Supreme Court justice who's an Arab, Khalid Kabab. Before that, there was an Arab Israeli Supreme Court justice named George Kara. And George Kara actually sentenced a Jewish Israeli president to prison for sexual assault. He was the jurist who sentenced him, and he went to jail. Okay, that would never happen in a discriminatory apartheid state. Furthermore, Arabs are allowed to purchase property in Israel. They're allowed to vote in elections. They're allowed to go wherever they want. They're allowed to do whatever they want. You said that you mentioned Hebrew being the official language of Israel, and awesome. It probably should be, considering it's 70% Jewish people who speak Hebrew. Have you ever been to Israel?
No, me personally, I have not.
Okay, so I've been to Israel, and I'm not saying that means you can't argue, because I hadn't been to Israel for a long time, and I still argue this topic. When you go to Israel, every single sign that you see anywhere will be in 3 languages: Hebrew, Arabic, and English, in that order. Everywhere. There's not a place you will go in Israel that does not have signs in every single language. Even a lot of the storefronts, whether they're owned by a Jew or an Arab, will have their signs in at least Hebrew and Arabic, but usually in English as well. Jewish students are required to learn Arabic. Doesn't mean they always study super hard. You know, when I learned Spanish in school, I can't speak a lick of Spanish today other than ordering another beer. But they learn it, and the signage everywhere is in English, Arabic, and Hebrew. So I don't really see any kind of ding against Israel outside of symbolism here. It's not going to change anything. Israeli soldiers still speak Arabic. Arab people will still speak Arabic, and they'll probably learn Hebrew or English as well. Jews will learn Hebrew, probably Arabic, and most of the time English as well. Like, who cares, right? They can communicate with each other. Their signs have sufficient languages. It's not a problem. Everywhere you go, even when you're at like Jewish religious sites, all of the signs will still be in Arabic. So I don't see a problem here. I don't think it really matters all that much. Talk about demolishing homes. the reason homes get demolished in Israel, and I think this might also be something that like a lot of people don't realize if they've never been to Israel, is you need a permit to build houses in Israel. And you need permits to build houses in the United States too. But there's an extra layer to it in Israel that people don't realize. So in the United States, usually the permits are required for like safety and stuff like that. There is a class of Arabs in Israel called the Bedouins. You probably know who they are. They're nomadic people that move around and they build houses pretty much wherever they feel like it. And they have their houses demolished a lot because they build without permits. And the reason you need a permit in Israel, more than you might in other countries, is because everywhere you go in Israel, if you throw a stone in Israel, you're likely to find a religious site buried underneath the ground, whether it be a Muslim religious site or a Christian religious site or a Jewish religious site. So every single building that is built in Israel is required to have an archaeological survey done prior to the building of that building. A really good example of this is in the Galilee region, in Magdala. There is a hotel called the Magdala. And they were going to build this hotel for tourists, and it was going to be real nice. And they started building, and the Israeli government was like, "You didn't get a permit for this building." And they're like, "Well, it's probably fine." They're like, "No, you didn't get your archaeological survey. You have to get your survey done here, and we need to find out what's underneath this land, and you need to dig if there's something under it." And they did, and they got their archaeological survey, and they found a first century synagogue underneath where they were going to build this church. And the reason that synagogue was relevant is, besides the fact that they found a whole town underneath it, but in this town they found the only two first century mosaics in all of Israel. And on top of that, there was something very significant about this synagogue. It was a first century synagogue. And we knew something about the Bible, and that was that Jesus preached in a synagogue in Magdala. But the problem was there was no synagogues in Magdala. There was no first century synagogues anywhere in Magdala, but they found one. So this is one of the few places in all of Israel where, with almost 100% certainty, they can say Jesus stood right here. Okay, so it was like very important archaeological discovery. Whether you care about the religious stuff or not, it's very significant. And they found a table for the Torah scrolls, and it was very well preserved. And so they're like, okay, Jesus likely laid out scrolls right here and then walked around this room and taught people and preached. Okay, so it's like very important. That's why you have to secure permits in Israel before you build something. And it just so happens that this group of people never secure permits almost ever, and they get their houses demoed disproportionately, specifically in the Negev Desert and the Galilee region.
Okay, could I respond?
Yeah.
All right, so there's a lot. I guess we'll just kind of go over it again. First of all, with the first intifada, was there some violence with the first intifada? Of course. There's violence in lots of these like massive type of protests and civil demonstrations. But you can look this up again on Al Jazeera, Amnesty International, or any type of international website. There's an overall consensus that the majority of the first intifada was peaceful, and Israel responded to it very disproportionately. 2, you said that Hamas was diverting the aid. Now, according to a U.S. envoy back in around April 2024, so it's a little bit old, so I'll provide other sources like the World Food Program and the UN. These 3 independent sources all said that Israel had provided no evidence that Hamas is diverting aid. That is a lie that the Zionists have made up to justify starving Gaza absolutely out. And 3, one of the other points you made about the nation-state law being symbolic, I don't think that matters. Because if America passed a law basically saying that self-determination is unique to white people or unique to Christians, we would be calling this a white supremacist or a Christian supremacist state. So I don't know when Israel does it, how is it not a Jewish supremacist state? And another point you made that was kind of silly was like, you're not an occupation if it was never a state. The definition of occupation according to the Hague Regulations of 1907 never talks about having to occupy a state. It's simply if a hostile enemy occupies a foreign territory, and if they can invest authority over that foreign territory, then it's an occupation. And Israel does do that in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank and Eastern Jerusalem. So these places are all occupied. And another point you made, let's go with this, outpost versus no permanence. Yeah, I wrote that down specifically because you were saying that they're getting their homes demolished because of no permanence. 1, the occupation is legal. So anything Israel actually does in the West Bank is completely illegal because occupations aren't supposed to be permanent. But this occupation is very obviously permanent. when Israel says that settlements are a national virtue, and when they keep talking about stuff like annexing the West Bank, that makes it very clear that this occupation is permanent, and there's no such thing as a legal permanent occupation under international law. So any actions Israel does in the West Bank, and I mean any, are illegal. And two, I think this is just so funny because Israeli outposts, which are literally settlements that are built without the permission of the Israeli government, lots of them get legalized, or at least the Israeli soldiers will turn a blind eye. But the moment a Palestinian tries to just build a home for their family on land that they lived on for generations, then Israel's like, oh no, now we're really going to enforce the law, and we're going to demolish your home. And two, I think just morally speaking, you should let in aid into any territory. And we know that twice in this war, Israel just had literally stopped all aid from entering the Gaza Strip. This had been extremely devastating. Hamas getting elected in 2006 does not justify collective punishments. The effects of the blockade that Israel had done on the Gaza Strip have been completely awful. I mean, over half of the territory unemployed or living in poverty, 80% relying on humanitarian aid, and this was before October 7th of 2023. Other points you made, it's funny how you always talk about the violence of the first intifada, but you want to acknowledge things like tax boycotts, strikes, and civil demonstrations, which were all very peaceful access of the first intifada. You can go.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so you said the majority of the first intifada was mostly peaceful, which I find hilarious because this is literally like the CNN reporter on the news. Well, there's a building burning behind her. They're mostly peaceful protests. Yeah, if you have 1,000 people out and then 5 people kill people, the majority of people at the protest were peaceful, right? You could say that January 6th was mostly peaceful, right? It doesn't make any sense, right? Because when you have an assembly and people get killed, it doesn't matter. The assembly is now violent. So it is a fact that during the first intifada, 200 innocent Jewish people were murdered, okay? You can say it was mostly peaceful all you want, but the fact of the matter is that they killed 200 people in a couple of years, okay? And as far as this like cracking down super hard on the violent demonstrations, hell yeah, man, you're killing 200 people. Yeah, you should crack down hard, and you should hurt people. And I wish that we would do that here in the United States, but we don't, unfortunately. You said anything Israel does in the West Bank is illegal because it's an occupation. Can you tell me?
No, that's not what I said, actually, at all.
You said that it's a permanent occupation?
I said that permanent occupations are illegal.
Whatever.
Temporary occupation is actually legal.
Whatever. So you said it's a...
No, that's a very important...
Okay, hold up. Let me reframe, because this is still my time, okay? You said... Because it's a permanent occupation, that means that anything Israel does in the West Bank is illegal. Okay? Again, I'm going to state again, I think national law is a joke. Or international law is a joke. I think that it's unenforceable, and laws are only as valid as their enforcement mechanism. Therefore, I think that international law is a joke. I'm also not a globalist. I think it's a joke. I don't think it should be enforced. I don't think that anybody should pay it any mind. But you can have moral claims about things. So if you think this is an occupation and you think it's wrong, we can talk about that. I don't think that the West Bank is being illegally occupied by Israel. And furthermore, you talked about outposts and settlements. By the way, every outpost and settlement within the West Bank is in Area C, which is firmly Israeli territory. Do you know how Palestinians got control of the West Bank? Or portions of the West Bank?
Process.
Oh, okay, interesting. And what did the Oslo process say?
If you want me to just give the breakdown of the Oslo process.
No, I don't want a whole breakdown. What were the conditions? The conditions were
3 areas that the West Bank would be split into: Area A, Area B, and Area C.
Okay.
Again,
can you tell me? Well, pause. Can you tell me what each were?
Area A specifically says that civilly and security, the Palestinians run that.
Okay.
Area B was like, okay, Palestinians, you can civilly run that, but we're going to security basically run it.
Okay.
And Area C, which is like the vast majority of the land, 60% to be exact, gives complete control to the Israelis.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so Area C is Israeli territory. So let's every outpost and settlement is in Area C, Israeli territory. But let's talk about the agreement. Is Oslo still like a valid agreement in your opinion?
The Oslo Accords, absolutely not.
Oh, not absolutely not?
No.
Okay, perfect. So there shouldn't be any argument about this, right? The fact of the matter is the Palestinians breached the Oslo Agreement when Yasser Arafat, who is the leader of the Palestinian Authority, which was the body created by the Oslo Agreement to run Area A and B of the Palestinian West Bank, Yasser Arafat went to the negotiating table in Camp David in 2005 with Bill Clinton and Ehud Barak, the present leader of Israel. Okay, and what happened was Yasser Arafat was offered 90+% of the West Bank and 6% of Israel, 4% of Israel. Okay, with East Jerusalem as its capital for the new Palestinian country. Yasser Arafat was given one major condition, and that major condition is that there would not be any more Palestinian attacks on Israel out of the newfound country. Yasser Arafat knew that he could not contain his people, became very frustrated that he wasn't going to get his country, went home, instructed Hamas to carry out the Second Intifada, and they went on to kill over 1,000 Jews. The agreement was broken. Okay, and if you don't believe me, don't take it from me. Take it from Yasser Arafat's wife, Suha, who went on Dubai National Television and explained exactly this. Yasser Arafat became very upset after the negotiations. He went home. He told Suha, remain in Paris. Do not come home. She was in Paris at the time. Don't leave France because you could die. Stay there. I'm going to launch the Second Intifada. And he did exactly that, and he ordered the killing of over 1,000 Jews through purely violent means. This wasn't prompted by any kind of retaliation against Israel. Okay, it was because Yasser Arafat couldn't get what he wanted. So it wasn't. They tried it the peaceful way, even though they killed 200 people, and then they tried it the violent way. That's not how it went down. How it went down was Yasser Arafat was butthurt, and then he decided to kill over 1,000 Jews. Okay, so the agreement was broken. The Palestinians, in my opinion, should have no claim over the West Bank at all. I think that Israel should march in there and take everything. But instead, they maintain the status quo, which allows the Palestinian Authority to have control over Area A and civil control over Area B. They continue to not establish settlements in Area B or A of the West Bank. They don't establish outposts in Area B or A of the West Bank. And again, in my opinion, they should just storm in there and take the whole thing, right? Because the Palestinians have no claim over it. There was no Palestinian state in the West Bank ever at any point in history, literally ever. Instead, what Israel did is, out of the kindness of their hearts, established an agreement in the 1990s, the Oslo Agreements, 1994, 1996, that over a 5-year span, they would create a Palestinian state in the West Bank. It didn't go so well. It resulted in over 1,000 Israelis being killed. And so the agreement is broken, okay? And there are no obligations per Oslo to be upheld by the Israelis. It's their territory, and they should annex it.
Okay, I guess I'll go with the first point. It's funny how you talk about the ways the Palestinians have violated the Oslo Accords, which is true, but it's just extremely one-sided. In the Oslo Accords, Israel said that we'll recognize that the West Bank and the Gaza Strip are a singular territory, basically. So fine, we get to occupy some of it, but you guys are a singular territory. Israel have not fulfilled this obligation literally at all under the Oslo Accords. They have maintained the policy of separations. They have massively increased checkpoints. They have massively increased security barriers, and they have erected new walls of these separations. And two, you keep saying that international law is a joke. International law is a joke. Under international law, that's what makes genocide illegal. That's what makes war crimes illegal. I support international law because it makes things that we can both agree that are wrong, but I don't even think you actually agree that it's wrong to unalive civilians. But it makes things that people should all agree that is wrong, and international law says, okay, those things are illegal. And another point is that you said Israel, out the kindness of their own hearts, separate the West Bank into these multiple pieces. It wasn't because of the kindness of their own hearts. Make this clear. It's because of massive international pressure, and it was because George W.H. Bush was already withholding lots of loans if Israel wouldn't stop expanding settlements. So you can't say it's out the kindness of their own hearts when they're getting pushed in this position by the entire international community. Because the First Intifada was so overwhelmingly peaceful, the international community felt very bad for the Palestinians. Because Israel responded so violently against the Palestinians, and it wasn't just soldiers, it wasn't just violent people, it was even civilians who were peacefully protesting and they got shot with rubber bullets. The international community was like, Israel, you need to try peace with the Palestinians through the Oslo process. And how did Israel actually act during the Oslo Accords? By completely being a bad faith actor, massively expanding settlements, massively expanding home demolitions, massively expanding restriction on movement. Another point is that you keep saying that Arafat got mad because he didn't get what he wants. No, Arafat was mad because the PLO and him made all these massive concessions to Israel. In the 90s, they were being like, okay, fine, we're going to recognize you as a state, even if you don't recognize us as a state. Okay, fine, we're going to denounce terrorism. Okay, could he give us something to work with? And then Israel completely screwed them over in the Camp David summit where they said, no right to return, no Eastern Jerusalem, we still get to control the movement and electricity. So Arafat was like, I made all these concessions concessions, and they still completely fuck me over like this. Of course, the Palestinian response was going to be violence. And you keep saying that, oh, well, this is the CNN approach of where you say that something was overwhelmingly peaceful despite some violent actors. No, I agree with the CNN approach when it comes to this. If a thing is overwhelmingly peaceful, if the majority are being peaceful, then it would be accurate to declare that as a mostly peaceful movement with some violent actors. And it's funny how you didn't address the point of lots of the violent actors were provoked by Israel. Israel was shooting rubber bullets, and lots of the time these protests would become violent in the first Intifada. And I don't get this point where you're saying that all of the West Bank should just belong to Israel, because honestly, I would be fine if Israel literally controlled all the land, and if the Israeli government just controlled all the land, and if they just treated Palestinians, and if they just treated Israelis as equals. If they didn't confiscate their land, if they didn't demolish their homes, if they didn't push them off their land and let their settlers commit violence against them with impunity, if they didn't do collective punishment like blockades and make them suffer, if they didn't continue to brutally occupy them, I would be fine with the one-state solution where the Israeli government runs everything, because it would be a democratic state with equal rights for everybody.
And the great thing is we have that.
That's not the current reality we live in.
And the great thing is we have that. And every Arab that is an Israeli citizen, pause.
What about the West Bank?
Every Arab, well, they're not citizens of Israel, so that's why they can't vote. But every Arab, the 2 million Arabs that are citizens of Israel, have the right to vote in elections. They have the right to serve in government office. They have the right to buy land. They have the right to purchase homes. They have the right to do anything that any Israeli can do. They can go to college. They can get a job. They can get any job they want as long as they're qualified. They can do or go wherever they want or whatever they want. There are equal rights in Israel. The fact of the matter is that the people that call themselves Palestinians, so one major problem here is, like, for example, Palestinians living in East Jerusalem, for example. It's under Israeli control. Israel routinely offers them citizenship. But what's the problem? Oh, well, it's because the Palestinian Authority tells them, if you take Israeli citizenship, we will revoke your Palestinian citizenship, and you won't be allowed back into areas A of the West Bank. So they say, no, I don't want to be an Israeli citizen. There are so many Arabs living in East Jerusalem that they could elect an Arab mayor of Jerusalem, but they refuse to do it because they have the right to vote, because Israel makes them permanent residents. All right, because you can't force citizenship on a person, but you can force permanent residency on them. So they say, you're a permanent resident of Israel now. They're allowed to vote in elections. They abstain. They choose not to vote in elections because they think they're boycotting the Israeli government or something. It's quite frankly ridiculous. It's idiotic and stupid. Complete waste of your own political power, and then basically blaming Israel for it. It's stupid. You said that Israel didn't acknowledge Gaza and the West Bank as one singular entity. Let's skip back to the beginning of this conversation. Do you have any idea in your head why Israel might not acknowledge Gaza and the West Bank as the same entity?
That's really not the point.
Wait, no. It is the point you're making. No. You said pause. I'm going to kick you. You say another word, I'm going to kick you. You said, as a point against Israel, that they did not uphold the Oslo Agreement because they did not acknowledge the Gaza Strip and the West Bank as one singular entity. Why might they not acknowledge the West Bank and Gaza Strip as one singular entity?
You're going to say because of terrorism.
No, not because of terrorism, because I'm not an idiot. Why might you think? I want you to think long and hard. I want you to really grind the gears in your head and watch the smoke roll out of your ears. Why might Israel not acknowledge the Gaza Strip and the West Bank as one singular entity?
You're going to say because of terrorism.
No, because I'm not an idiot. Again, you're an idiot. I'm not an idiot. Okay? So the reason they might not acknowledge these two...
That sounds like somebody who's losing.
No. The reason the Israeli government might not acknowledge the Gaza Strip and the West Bank as one singular entity is because they aren't one singular entity. They're not connected, and they have two separate governments. Okay, does that make sense to you? If something has two separate governments...
Under the Oslo Accords, they're supposed to be one singular territorial unit.
And did that work out?
The deal that you're claiming that Israel had
and did that work out?
But they didn't.
And did that work out?
If you want to make the argument that the Oslo Accords was bad, then fine.
And did that work out? And did that work out? But did it work out like that? But did it work out like that?
Before 2005, they were both ran by Fatah, were they not?
Right, with a rising entity in the Gaza Strip and virtually all of the support going to Hamas, with it being de facto run by Hamas. So they're not the same entity. Furthermore, I don't think like, again, I think this is going to be a pretty small like tick Israel's not holding up their end because they didn't explicitly say that the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, which are not the same entity, are the same entity. As opposed to Yasser Arafat launched a massive attack against Israel and killed over 1,000 Jews. Furthermore, you said that Yasser Arafat wasn't offered East Jerusalem in the Camp David negotiations, which is not true. He was offered 90% of the West Bank, 4% of Israel, and East Jerusalem as Palestine's capital, and he rejected it and then went home and launched the Second Intifada. He was given everything. This was literally like the sweetheart deal.
He couldn't control the electricity and move.
This was literally the sweetheart deal. They would have sovereignty. They'd be their own country. Right.
No,
and I don't understand this. I don't understand this. Again, it's my turn to talk. It's my turn to talk. We're having a great conversation. We're going back and forth. I gave you time to talk. You gave me time to talk. So we're not going to be doing this cutting off shit, or I'm going to kick you. Again, I don't know why it's Israel's job to provide power to the West Bank. If you want electricity in the West Bank and you have a sovereign country in the West Bank, here's an idea: build a fucking power plant. Whoa! Oh my God! Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! The world would be no! Oh my God! Oh my God! No, they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't. Show me where in Oslo this is the case. Oh my God! Can you imagine a world with Can you? I'm gonna kick you now. I'm gonna kick you now. Say one more word. I'm gonna kick you. Yeah, I'm gonna kick you. Yeah. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Yeah. Okay. All right.
That's my last word.
All right. Can you imagine a world? Can you imagine a world where the Palestinians they grow their own food? Oh my God. They have their own electricity. They build their own power plants. Oh my God. Can you imagine a world where the Palestinians cook their own food, where they provide for their own people? Can you imagine that? Instead of going around the world as the fucking vagrant beggars of the world, begging everybody else for, please a little bit of food, sir. Please a little bit of food, sir. No, nobody's under obligation to fucking feed you. Grow your own goddamn food.